$250,000 revenue. Oops, in less than $250,000 in revenue, they do now have their Impact Boost Awards, but this is not I'm not doing a workshop on that because you really don't have to do very much. This is for the transformational grants where you need to have revenue between 250,000 and 30 million. So they're looking for, if you have a previous Impact 100 Westchester Transformational Grant, project grant, and if you've been lucky enough to have received one, you are eligible to reapply if the project has been completed and 100% of the grant funds have been received and you have done all the required reporting that has been submitted. And they don't want to allow a town or a village to apply. So the other thing in terms of eligibility, that has to serve residents of Westchester County. You're as an organization or even as your project, you can serve both Westchester and other areas like New York City or Putnam, but you need to have a good, significant, I believe, percentage of those residents who are in Westchester County. They're not giving you a specific percentage, but I will tell you, in order to be compelling, it has to be a significant project with significant number of people if you're looking to have only support for Westchester County where you serve more than that. The funds that you're going to ask for need to be spent in Westchester County. It can be a new program or the expansion of an existing program or a capital project. You got to look at it in terms of being transformational for both the organization and also the target audience. They want to know that you have a plan for sustainability. How are you going to, maintain it? Unless it is a very discrete thing, like I'm going to buy a van or I'm going to do this capital renovation, and how are you going to assess it? How are you going to measure it? So the grant funds, if you are award winner, you need to spend the money within 18 months of the initial grant installment and you have to allocate core operating expenses. You can't do it in more than 30% of the transformational project grant. And when we get to the budget, I'm really going to focus on that because they really do want you to put 30% or up to 30% of the budget into into the core operating expenses. They feel like a lot of nonprofits are not using it and they want you to. So operating expenses allocated to a project, which they are referring to as core operating expenses, should not exceed 30% of the grant amount. And for this purpose, they consider those expenses to be admin, salaries, maintenance, repairs, and other essential expenses as defined by the nonprofit. This is meaning like the expenses that are going to happen no matter what, whether this project goes forward or not. If there are, more specific things to the project, you probably would put that into the project budget itself on the Impact 100 funding. So things that they don't fund, you probably already know this. They don't want to fund, religion-based, partisan, annual, or political appeals or in support of any political party. They're not going to fund loans or debt reduction or interim bridge financing. Anything that's exclusively operating funds, they will not fund, meaning all of the budget is in operating. Endowments, research, projects benefiting a for-profit organization, private foundation, or individual, and then overall general capital campaigns or fund drives. They will fund capital projects. It could be a renovation, it could be a building, things like that. So Impact 100 will not fund transformational project grants. Again, I just said that. And then the amount of money that you're going to use for your project budget is going to be announced on January 12th. And as I've said before, it can really range anywhere between 75,000 and 100,000. I think last year, I believe it was 85,000. I think there were two transformational grants of 85,000, and then there was two core mission grants of 27,000. And so the way this works is that you submit your application for a transformational project grant. Those are due January 23rd. Again, it should be either a new program, expansion of an existing program, or a capital project. It really has to dramatically address an unmet need. And there will be a grant agreement that you have to sign once you are awarded. The final award, the awards are done at the annual meeting, June 9th next year. on 2026. And after that, if you are one of the lucky award winners, you will go into a contract or grant agreement with Impact 100 that needs to be signed. Usually that takes place between June and August. I would always tell people not to really start the spending of Impact 100 money until probably August 15th, because that contract process can take a little time. And there will be periodic reporting, as you might expect a foundation to do. So that's the core, the transformational project grants. And what happened is there's different stages in terms of you submit your application, then at a certain point there's going to be a notification whether you've made it to the second round. And then if you are made it to the second round, then there's a virtual site visit. And then if you going on from there, there's another site visit, and the final lists are announced, and there could be four, there could be five finalists, and those are the ones who are going to be making a little presentation at their annual meeting. So if there are four or five finalists, you know that you are at least going to get a core mission grant. Because what happens is they may select two of the five to receive a transformational project grant of the $85,000 or $100,000. But the other three or two, depending on how many finalists there are going to receive a core mission grant. And that core mission grant can be used for anything. It doesn't have to be for the project. So, and I think last year there were two core mission grants of $27,000 each. So you know that, it's a lot of work. This process is a lot of work. There's a lot of steps. But if you are one of the four or five finalists, you could get potentially over $25,000 at the very least. And then finally, there's also the Impact Boost Awards. I'm not really going to be getting into that process because that's for those nonprofits with less than $250,000 in revenue. The grants can range anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000. It's a much simpler application process. That portal opens later on in January after the transformational grant deadline. And then there's various steps in terms of that one dates. So I wanted to show you just very briefly for a second who's won this. And you can see that there's really a variety in terms of capital projects, expansions, new programs. A lot of people say, is it always a capital project that wins or is it always an expansion? And it's not. I mean, last year, the Port Chester Carver Center won. They had a capital project. The Bridge Fund of New York had an expansion. The year before, Hearts and Homes for Refugees were, applying for a new program. So you can see it really does, run the gamut. There's not any one thing. Again, so you could see program capital, it runs the gamut. It really is all based on the strength of your program, the strengths of the organization, and this how compelling you are making the ask. So I think it's really important to get into the head of Impact 100 Westchester. Like, what are they thinking about when they're looking at your application? I think this is, if anything, take these two slides and put it next to you when you're developing your application and your project, because these are the questions you really need to answer and make sure that it's compelling. The first thing, is it transformational? That they're defining that as a new program, expansion of an existing program, a capital project that meets an unmet need. So ask yourself, is the project proposal transformation not only for the organization, but for the population it's serving? Does it meet an unaddressed need? Is it impactful? Will this impact be broad, meaning lots of people, or is it going to be in depth, meaning really getting to the deep, or both? Well, who does it serve? What are the needs there, and why is it so compelling? Why is this population so important? What is the size of the population? And then we're talking about Westchester here, Westchester population. Implementation. They want to know that your organization's in good shape to handle the project, that you have credibility in terms of being able to handle projects of this kind of size, and you have a strong leadership and a position well to implement it. So that they, at the end of the day, they want to know that they're giving their money to your organization, that you have a very highly likelihood of completing your project and of implementing it. Assessment. What they want to know, is this clearly defined? And do you have the logistics, the timeline, the facility, the resources needed for this project to be completed? And do you have contingency plans in place in case certain things may be at risk? And also, are you going to be able to measure it? How do you know it was successful? So to get started, that's that, conversation. I don't know if there's any specific questions, and I kind of don't really want to address eligibility because again, I'm not a member of Impact 100. I think if you do have specific eligibility questions, you probably should talk to email grants at impact100westchester.org. They're very helpful and they will probably give you more advice as to what their who the members might be telling you in terms of eligibility. But before we get started, the first thing, planning is everything, I think, in terms of this application, in terms of the project, in terms of writing the application. Read everything on the Impact 100 website. They have a pretty good FAQ section that does get into a lot of detail. Plan with your team, read all the questions before you're starting to write, gather all the information you need. There are attachments that you have to have, like the 501c3 and various audited financial statements and 990s. And then I recommend that you write, your narrative in Word, write the questions in Word, write your answers, and then cut and paste it into the application. I think it ends up being easier that way. So there's some helpful resources that, I'm going to plug GPLH here again because GPLH really does want to help. Deborah, Maureen, they're our co-presidents, are wonderful. The board, they have a wonderful board, and they're happy to help you in any way if you have any specific questions. I know people are using AI and you can use AI for this. There's one site here, we're talking about grantsforgood.com, but there's ChatGPT, there's Claude. I'm not going to get into AI, but it can be good for first drafts. It could be good for editing because some of these questions only have a limit of 500 characters. And it could even, if you put in the right prompt in terms of, can I make this more compelling? Am I answering this properly? It could give you some information that you didn't know, or, that you can then use to tweak your answer accordingly. So there's also, just so you know, on the Impact 100 site, there's a grant information session that they gave a couple of weeks ago that you can look at and view to see more information about the whole process. But before we start, you need to the application is in Slide Room, and you need to be able to create an account in Slide Room in order to access the application. So the first thing where you find that is if you go onto the Impact 100 Westchester site, you click on apply for a grant, then you go to grant application resources, and then there's a grant application portal button. So you click on that. And one thing to note is that every organization has to register with its unique email and set up an account and password. If you're a grant writing consultant, don't use your own username and password and email because it really needs to be from the organization to have one account and password set up. So and then I'm showing you exactly what you're going to see online. So don't think, oh, well, I'm not taking you through the application. I am. This is what you're going to see when you go onto the application. So the first thing it says is to help us properly identify this application, the Slide Room account program should indicate the organization's need. Before proceeding any further, please confirm that the Slide Room profile reflects the organization's name. And then they're giving you a contact here in case you need help updating your account profile if you're using an older one. So then you click on yes, the organization, the account profile reflects our name. Then you'll see, please confirm that you reviewed our eligibility guidelines and requirements. So then you're going to check, yes, I have. If you're checking that, you're not eligible, will not continue, then you're going to drop off the application. So really, I'm hoping you'll be able to check, yes, I reviewed, and yes, I do, I'm eligible. You'll put in your executive director name, you'll put in their email and their phone number. Next thing is they're going to ask you to upload your 501c3 letter. I'm just reminding you to make sure that anything you're uploading is a PDF when it comes to the financial data, when it comes to the audit statements, the 990, the 501c3. So one question they have next is, has the organization's 501c3 been in full force and effective throughout the past 3 years? So if you're going to answer yes, you'll go on to the next question. But if for some reason you're answering no, like if your 501c3 has been revoked or modified in some reason, you're going to get, if you say yes to that, you're going to get this extra question that pops up saying, please explain. So if you check no, you'll see the following prompts. So you're going to have to explain. But I'm telling you, if there's issues with your 501c3, that you might need to talk to Impact 100 first before going through this whole application because that may be a red flag to them. The next section is organization. This is what you're going to see when you click on that tab. And there are tabs on the left that you'll see organization, project, so you can go to each tab as well directly. So this section, this is all about your organization before we get into the project. They're going to ask you some specific questions about that. What's your legal name? And the legal name should match what you have on your 501c3. There are organizations that have a legal name and then they have a DBA. They want this needs to be the legal name that's on your 501c3. And if it's the fiscal sponsor, such as a national organization, you're going to look at the grant FAQs for additional information on how to apply with a fiscal sponsor. So if you're saying no to I don't have our own 501c3, that's probably because you might have a fiscal sponsor. You're going to have another pop-up question that says describe your relationship with your fiscal sponsor and indicate whether you keep independent and reviewed accounting records. So there they want to know what the nature of the relationship is with your sponsor, what kind of financial support you're being given, the management control, extent of independent financial statements like your income statement and balance sheet. You do have a 6,000 character maximum here, so you can get into these detail. And I would address each one of those things in your answer here about it. But know that it's okay to use a fiscal sponsor, but a sponsor can only apply for one project. Okay, so the next, couple of address questions are pretty self-explanatory. This is the site address. This is for your organization, not the project yet. This is for your organization where your main activities are located. The mailing address, if it's different than the site address, your website, when did the organization begin operations? And that, you look at your 501c3. If for some reason it only has a month and a year and not a date, I think I suggest just using the first of the month in that. If you put in something that says, September 1st, 2023, well, you're going to get a pop-up because you're supposed to be able to show at least 3 years of operating history. So you're going to get this pop-up question that says, be advised that your organization does not qualify for an Impact 100 Westchester grant at this time because we require at least 3 years of operating history. So you'll have to check, understood, we'll wait to apply, or that you're going to contact Impact 100 about it. But note that again, if you're going to put something in really recent about when you started, you're going to get that pop-up. They really do want 3 years of operating history to be able to apply. The next question is asking about your audit. In the past 2 years, has your CPA or auditor expressed any concerns regarding your organization's financial health and/or viability to continue to operate as a going concern? So if you answer yes to this, you're going to get another question that says, please provide an explanation. But if you have to think about, what they're looking for in terms of who they want, what kind of organizations they want to support. And if your organization has been operating in the red for many years, this could be a red flag. Understandably, they're looking to give their money to an agency that will be there in the future, but you could also, give an explanation, and that could be sufficient. And you do have plenty of characters to do it. So next is, has your organization ever received an Impact 100 Transformational Project grant? If you say no, you'll be able to just move on. If you say yes, you can still apply, but again, they have the requirements that you have to have completed your prior transformational project, received 100% of the grants, and also have submitted all required reporting. So you can then, hopefully that will be the case. You can say yes. So you'll click on all prior project grant funds received before November 1st, 2025, and our project is complete. The next question is, about your board information. They want to get a list of your board of directors. And note here, they're looking for specific information about them, their name, their board position, their professional affiliation, the city, state, and also don't forget number of years served. You could do this in two ways. You could either input the information directly or you can upload it as a document. So if you select upload the document, you'll get this prompt. Please upload your document. And then you click on the file button to upload your document and make sure you're uploading a PDF. If you want to input the information directly, you can see at the bottom of the slide, you'll get this kind of chart with the things you need to fill out: the director name, the board position, the professional affiliation, city, state, number of years served. And you'll be able to click on, you'll see a button that says add a row, because every time you fill out a row, you'll be able to click on that button to add on the next row, meaning the next board member. Number of employees. They want to know how many employees you have. You just round it up. You don't have to do 3.5 or 3.4. Just round it up. And FTE means full-time equivalent. And know that some organizations have FTE based on a 35-hour week. You don't have to, and you do not have to convert part-time employees to FTE, because the next, that you don't have to do that. So they really just want to know about full-time employees and just round it up if it's, a fraction. The number of volunteer staff is next. You don't have to convert this to full-time equivalent. Just if you have 3 volunteers, 2 of them work 5 hours, 2 of them work 10, one works 10 hours, it doesn't matter. You have 3 volunteers. The next question is, in the past 3 years, has your organization received any judgments or faced any pending or threatened litigation? If you say no, you'll go on to question 13. If you say yes, you're going to have to answer the following 2 questions. Number 1, you're going to have to explain what the litigation is about or any judgments in the last 3 years. And in number 2, they're going to want to then know some information about your liability and directors and officers insurance. They'll want to know the carrier name and coverage limits. I think they want to protect themselves to know that, there's no outstanding real litigation, or, if there's a reason for it and whatever, you just may have to fill that in. I think I've seen some foundations start to put these kinds of questions in there. So that's the organization section. I don't know, Deborah, does anybody have a question regarding that part? Because if not, I'll move on. You're on mute, Deb.
Having trouble
There you go.
unmuting. There we go. Just wasn't unmuting.
Yeah.
There's no one asking questions so far.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think so. It was pretty self-explanatory, because now we're getting into the application itself, about the project. And I have some overall suggestions. Brevity and trying to be concise is really important. There are 3 questions. You only get 500 characters. That's the mission. That's your major programs. This is regarding the organization, and that's your project overview. Then where you got some more opportunities to really strut your stuff, meaning you have more characters, like 6,000, is the logistics of your project, the activities, the timeline, who your project's going to serve, how is it transformational, where will it take place, and how does it fit your mission. So this is where you could use the help of AI, especially on those 500 character questions. I just wanted to make that clear up front. So the first thing you're going to see is mission major programs. And this section requires you to provide information about your organization's mission and major programs. They're telling you you got 500 characters to put in your mission statement. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Start with an opening sentence. A very good agency is a 501c3 social service agency dedicated to feeding the hungry in Westchester County. And then our mission is to. Then we have some other ones, and they get, some of these are longer. The XYZ agency is a nonprofit, family-oriented community service organization that welcomes all people and promotes positive values through programs that build spirit, mind, and body. We strive to meet the diverse health, wellness, social, and recreational needs of our 8,688 members and the communities we serve: Rye, Harrison, Mamaroneck, Larchmont, Rybrook, and Portchester, by focusing on youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. Oh, I want to tell you too, everyone will get a copy of these slides. You don't have to frantically, scribble down these notes. I think that should have mentioned that at the beginning. I apologize. So you'll have these slides so that at least you'll have all these examples in your possession. So I'm not going to read all of them, but a lot of the similarities here is that they're mentioning how many people are served. They're talking about who they are. They're talking about, what they're dedicated to doing. And they even are putting in some uniqueness. I would be sure to mention that you serve Westchester residents because that's what this is about. Um, and the next thing is describe now, as far as, hang on a second, I don't think I was wanting to do that. Okay, yeah. So the next question also is you have character limits. Describe your organization, the major program, sorry, the major programs that are support your organization's mission. Again, you don't have a lot of room here to do it, and it's good. You have to be able to be really concise. I suggest using bullets to go through to show who you are. You can see here they're talking about a family programs that provide support their mission of providing safe, affordable, and quality childcare programs to Yonkers residents. And here they just bullet what those programs are. I would mention special partnerships if you have them. Our programs are open to any individual or family seeking assistance, and the agency strives to turn no one away. Our motto is that every child is capable of reaching their fullest potential. If you can, if you have the room, you can mention any accomplishments you have. For 6 years, we've operated a college prep program for high schoolers with great success. 100% of our seniors have applied and gotten accepted into college. So here's some more examples of our the brief program description. You can include some things about your organization's uniqueness. That can be factual. It can be uniqueness in philosophy, whether it's, unlike other agencies, a very good agency develops individualized programs for each client and treats them with dignity as they work to achieve self-sufficiency. It's respected for diversity of services. No one is turned away, or it can be factual, as you see some of the things that are stated up above. And then here's another one that's talking about how, unlike comparing it to other organizations that provide short-term enrichment opportunities, a very good agency's 9-year, year-round commitment to supporting and encouraging each child helps many youth experience breakthroughs in pushing the boundaries of what they believe they can achieve in school and later in their lives. So the next thing is talking about the project, want to know what the title is. You can try to come up with a descriptive title. You have 80 characters. Here's one: first job workforce development program for teens. What's the nature of this project? They want to know if it's new, expansion of an existing program, or capital, or other. And then project overview. This is a tough one because this one you have 500 characters to clearly describe what it is, what the goals are, and what the objectives are. So I have some things in here that I want to show you, but then I'll show you how you can get it to 500 characters. So here's one idea of a project that would launch a workforce development program that would impact the lives of 100 adults with developmental disabilities. And then you have a collaboration with whomever, and then you go into your objectives and your objectives. And we talk about SMART objectives. I'm sure many of you on this webinar have known what SMART objectives are, but for those who don't, you want to be able to write them, articulate them in the moment that they are specific, meaning they're simply written and clearly defined what your project is. They're measurable, that you have tangible evidence of goals and you can measure them. They're the impact. They're achievable, that they're realistic and attainable. They're results focused, that they serve an unmet need in a meaningful way. They're transformational for the organization and the people it serves. And they're sustainable, that you have a plan for sustainability. So there's some examples. Here's an example. A very good agency will launch a computer skills training program that will transform the lives of 380 unemployed and homeless individuals Participants will learn vital job skills, preparing them for tech careers and ultimately helping them become self-sufficient and break the cycle of poverty. So then we bulleted all the objectives. But guess what? We're at 695 characters. It's too long. And we know the characters counts are hard. So here's how to get it to 500. You can use AI too for suggestions, but here's one way to do it. We will launch a computer skills training program reaching 380 unemployed and homeless people. Participants will learn job skills in the tech industry that will help them become self-sufficient. The objectives are to provide job skills training to low-income residents who are unskilled or unemployed, or for 16 computer classes for 24 people in a class, 384 people, or for job search assistance to help participants obtain employment, provide a trained workforce for Westchester's computer tech industries. So not only does it tell you what the goal is, it tells you how many people are going to be reached, what they're going to learn, what the outcome that you're projecting is going to be. It gets into the objectives are the details in terms of how many classes, how many people it's going to reach. And also, not only it's saying to the reviewers that not only is it going to help people get employment and increase their self-sufficiency, it's going to provide a trained workforce for Westchester's computer tech industries. So it handles all those smart objectives. Um, Here's another one that's just on a different project that's 500 characters too. This is for a childcare need in Portchester for a new childcare center. To address the urgent need for childcare in Portchester, a low to moderate income area, and a childcare desert, the X partner will partner with X to renovate the community center and provide high quality, affordable, licensed full day childcare and early education for up to 103 children ages 3 to 5 months annually. 5 years annually. The new center opening in September 2026 will serve as a lifeline for families to maintain employment and break the cycle of poverty. So it addresses both the need, the need for childcare, that it's a childcare desert. It addresses the need for their early education, but it also addresses the need to help families maintain employment and break the cycle of poverty. And it tells you how many people, and it tells you when the center is going to open. So just one note here, note that your goals and objectives should relate to your need. Impact wants to know how you're going to solve the problem. What's the unmet need? You should articulate that, and that you should also address how your project's going to solve that problem. We are problem solvers. Tell them how the project is innovative, how it's out of the norm, first of its kind, first, no one other organization has done this. And if you could even say that it's part of your agency's strategic plan, we've recognized the need for X, and with this funding would finally be able to achieve this. You can show your passion and your enthusiasm. Our mission since 1924 has been to provide the best possible care for the elderly. This project will not only expand and enhance our elder care programming, but would enable us to meet a growing need for however the best way is for you, your organization, and this project to present it in 500 characters to make it the most compelling. The end of the day, always keep the reviewers in mind. These women want to make sure their donations are making a real difference. The next question, you have more room. You have 6,000 characters to address the logistics. They want to know about the timing, personnel, facilities, and other resources. And they want to know that you have a well-defined, well-thought-out project and that your organization has the capacity to handle it. So I suggest writing a short paragraph on each of these categories. So like for timing, if the project for which you're requesting Impact 100 funds is part of a larger project, indicate, when that specific Impact 100 project is going to start. If you are building a new building, but you want them just to do the HVAC, I'm just making this up. That HVAC is going to come into play later. So if you're going to tell them that, yes, the project's, that the building is going to be built, beginning January, but the HVAC will begin in March. Note also, and I'm putting a note here because I mentioned it previously, that you're probably going to have your contract, your grant agreement signed probably sometime around August. So I would suggest not having your the Impact 100 part of your project start until after August 15th. Again, your project, if it's a bigger project, can start earlier, but don't have the spending of your money for impact start before August 15th. Okay, so here's an example. Training will start August 15th, 2026, and will operate throughout the entire school year. We will offer 16 computer training sessions annually. Here's another one. The entire project will take place from September 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027. This will include drafting of final plans, ordering supplies, hiring a program manager, securing volunteer help, implementation of project, and implementing evaluation measures. So spell it out clearly the timing of it, when things are going to happen, and show that you really thought out the project details regarding timing of things. So here's an example of a special needs gym. So they bulleted the timing of the project to be done. So, okay, we're going to have in August contractors and equipments selected. Throughout August, we will have ordering we're going to order all the sports equipment, the padding, the insulated window curtains, the half curtain gym, the gym doors, and they really spelled it out. And they're going to select the floor furniture. Like you could say when you're going to select different vendors in the timeline too. They talk about in late August when the club is closed during summer break where they're going to start installing the new doors, the padding, really spell it out in terms of how this project is going to happen. September, October, the installation of the EC unit is going to happen. And then you can even talk about when the evaluation is going to be done for the project. I think, when you can put in when the reports are due for Impact 100, assuming that you're an award winner. This is all about timing. Here's another one. But they were purchasing a van and supplies. They were going to secure family provider partners and hire their teacher that they needed and the bus driver for a project. And this is all in August, knowing that from September on, the project's going to be implemented. So all the pre-planning has to get done in August. They're going to establish their schedule and start preparing the lesson plans. And then we'll get into later about the timing of the funds needed to pay for staff and things like that, but we'll address that in a minute. So, but they're noting here that this project, the program itself is going to run, up above, we talked about a renovation. That's, that begins and ends at a certain point. But a project that's a program, it starts, let's say they're saying to school year program. It's going to start in September. It'll end in June of 27. So you need to say that. But you can talk about, in August, what the pre-planning is going to be able to be done. If you have things that you need to do in July and June prior to August of 26, you can, but you can note that, but that's not going to be the Impact 100 grant money that you're going to spend. Again, that's if you have a project that costs more than the Impact 100 grant. You can show that I would suggest you show that whole project timeline, but note that, this is when the August time period is when the Impact 100 money is going to be starting to spend. The next section is on personnel. So what do you need? What are the requirements on personnel that you need for this project? So here we'll hire a qualified computer skills instructor per diem to teach for training cycles, keyboarding, suite, CAD, and Photoshop. The agency's current workforce development coordinator will manage admissions. That was for that computer programming project example I was talking about. And here's for a capital project example, similar to what we were talking about before, as we're noting that Mary Jones, the director of operations, will be responsible for internal coordination and overseeing the general contractor, likely XYZ Construction Company. Our treasurer, Nancy Smith, will oversee accounts payable. Our development director will be responsible for drafting and implementing evaluation surveys. Then you talk about, how you're going to get your contractors. So although we plan to bid out the project, we are leaning towards hiring XYZ contractors. And then you can say a little bit about them, who they are, how they're capable of handling your project in terms of experience. If you're using volunteers, you can mention them here. You could say that all of them will receive leadership training, will be screened if that's relevant. The next subcategory would be facilities. Okay, so where is it going to take place? This situation, they're talking about training taking place in the Brookfield Commons Community Education on the ground floor of a new building that's being built. The building is being funded by HUD, so you're telling them it's not Impact 100 that's paying for the building, and we expect to be completed by June 30th. The new center will contain 3 classrooms and a computer lab with 24 stations. So that's for that computer training program that we're talking about. Other resources that you want to be able to talk about. If it's a renovation or a capital project, you have your architectural drawings, you have your schematics or what the dates you're going to have them by. You've maybe secured an anonymous gift toward the project. We'll need to secure a permit, which we do not expect to be an issue since we are in good standing with our town. You can talk about partnership funds that you have, and who they're from. If there's a naming opportunity, you can say that in here in this logistics question, meaning name the playground after Impact 100 Westchester, be sure to mention it. And if the proposal, the project has the potential to be replicated, you should definitely say that, because that I think would have meaning to them. I think they would like to know that this project can be done elsewhere. But note again that this project, in the timing question, the facilities, the resources, that these grant funds, I'm just reminding you again, have to be expended in 18 months, and that it's not based on reimbursement. So if you have expenditures that are in June, don't have Impact 100 pay for them, because they're not going to reimburse you for funds already spent. The next question, that was a big question, the logistics, but I showed you a lot of different ways you could answer it. You have 6,000 characters, which is not bad. The next question is, they're going to want to know, are you collaborating with others to get this project done? So if you answer yes, the project involves other organizations, you're going to get a pop-up question that says, please explain how other organizations will collaborate with you. You'll have 6,000 characters to answer that. You should mention who they are, what their roles are. You can note that you've attached an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding, if you have some official collaborators, or if you just have letters of support. If you're not sure who they're going to be, the collaborators are, you can try to be as clear as you can. Meaning, here's one: we will install the playground with the help of local charity groups. We intend to reach out to the Boy Scouts, the Girls Clubs, the Lions Club, and Rotary Club, whom we have relationships with. You can talk about who you get referrals from in terms of who you collaborate. If you are a cancer support organization and you rely on the local hospitals, the local, organizations, community organizations, to refer clients to your project, you can mention those there. In the next question, they're asking you actually to list them and to tell whether they're for profit or if they've committed to them. So again, if you're working with specific organizations, collaborating with on the project, you could even put the contractor in here. If it's a renovation, you just say whether it's a yes, Y or N, whether it's yes or no, and you'll say whether they've committed or not. And I've done this once for a cancer support organization, truly, where I listed a lot of organizations, because all of them collaborate, because all of them help refer to the project. And there will be that button again when you could add rows. So don't be nervous that there's only 2 spots. So the next question that's going to pop up about that, if you say yes, you're collaborating, they want to know, what your contingency plans are if those collaborations fall. So there was one organization that I did win my client won the Impact 100 grant. That was for culinary arts training, vocational training program. And it relied on, they have a kitchen, and they had a part-time chef who was doing all their food for the lunches and stuff. So their idea was to hire, try to see if they could get that in-house trainer to do it, or to hire from the outside. So if that culinary arts training program relied on outsourcing the instructor, they wanted to get somebody coming in from the outside, we would have to tell them that our contingency would be that we would try to get the current kitchen chef to be able to do the training program, or to convert a part-time instructor to full-time. So Impact 100 wants to know that you have a plan B or C in case of contingencies, especially with renovations, especially with, things that you were counting on in terms of a program, and now we're not going to be sure. They want to know that you thought it through, that you have a plan B. Okay. The next question, you do have more characters, which is good because this is where you're going to talk about your target population. Who are they? Why do they need this? And I would suggest using bullets as much as possible. They're telling you they want you to include data, Westchester oriented data to describe your target population in Westchester and how it's transformational for the population. So you got to talk about the demographics, the number served, the location where they're located, if there's specific areas of Westchester, or if it's Westchester in general, or if it's Southern Westchester or Northern Westchester, and show the significant and unmet need. You want to talk about, again, Westchester stats as much as you can, because talking about cancer in New York State or what citing AIDS rates in New York State is not really impactful. You want to talk about Westchester because you're talking about the Westchester need. So here's an example from September 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027. First job will serve 100 underserved youth ages 14 to 18 in grades 9 to 12. All are White Plains and Greenberg residents. These communities have poverty rates of X and X, according to the US Census. Quote your sources. The demographic composition of participants includes ex-white, ex-black, and ex-Hispanic, all attend New Rochelle High School. Here's some other ones. Hang on a second. According to the Westchester County Department of Planning municipal profile, X% of Mount Vernon residents live in poverty, and X% in single parent households. Again, another way to talk about a project that has to do with Mount Vernon residents. You can talk about if it's about pregnancy and maternal care. You can talk about there's an X% pregnancy rate among girls aged 12 to 18 in Port Chester. I wanted to just show you how specific you can be and what kind of information you can put into this target audience question. Here's something on education. So according to the New York State Education Department, the average graduation rate among Hispanics in Westchester County high schools is X%, and cite the date that you're quoting. Is it 2004-25 school year or prior? A 10-year study completed by the Pew Research Center in 2013 found that Hispanics lag other groups in obtaining four-year degrees, and that 60% of Hispanics find jobs or enter the military after high school graduation, citing the need to immediately help support the family. So again, if it's about a vocational training, if it's about job training, if it's about education, you should really cite what's going on in the town or the area that you are having your project regarding education. Where is that need and who is it addressing? Is it specifically targeted to the Hispanic community or the Black community, or is it just in general an area like Mount Vernon that has issues in terms of education that you're going to be doing this amazing project for? The New York State School Report Card is amazing. It has a lot of data, especially on education and what's going on. It can do it by district, it can do it by school. And so here's an example of saying New York State School Report Card for Ossining High School. That's as specific as you want to be. Are X% are disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged, and X% are eligible for free or reduced lunch, which is a good indicator of poverty. So it really tells you what's going on into that district. You can include descriptors like this target audience, these kids present with a wide variety of disabilities, including autism and Down syndrome, and have limited income potential. You could also include stats from your own agency. Show how you know your population and who they are. You can talk about how you did a needs assessment and found that you have doubled your wait lists in the last 3 years, and talk about who your agency target audience is. 85% of our clients lack health insurance. So there's lots of ways to show who your audience is while also showing what the need is. And I know data is tricky and it can be, I know we have another plug for GPLH. We have a whole other session going on. I think it's in January, and I don't know the date off the top of my head, but there's Alice and Paul is going to do an amazing program on data because there's a lot of, nervousness about the data that exists out there right now because of what's going on in our lovely government. But there's some great other sources that are good that you can use, like the New York State Department of Health, the American Cancer Society is great for cancer facts and figures. The Westchester Index, New York Community Trust is good for sources. United Way is excellent, in terms of wanting to show that it's not just about Westchester, those serving below poverty, but also those who are between that poverty line and the higher income levels. New York State report cards are great in terms of education stats, Westchester Children's Association. And then just another plug for GPLH. If you go onto our website and look at under the resources tab, the data research resources, you'll have lots of other sources where you can find data to support your need, because that's what it's all about, supporting that need. We're still in this target audience question. I'm trying to give you as much information I can. You do have 6,000 characters, but this is not a separate question. This is more continuation, that things to think about. Why and how will this project be transformational for the population? What is this difference is this going to make for your target in terms of impact, not in terms of how many classes you're going to give them, but what's the impact of those classes going to be for your target? How is it going to change their lives? How is it going to address the needs as they relate and the outcomes as they relate? So one example, the project will annually create 100 new jobs, helping participants become independent and self-sufficient and break the cycle of poverty. Because that's the ultimate goal, is to break that cycle of poverty and help them become self-sufficient. The sub goal is to help create to have the 100 new jobs. Here's another one. Offering this new exciting program will be transformative, enabling children who would otherwise be unable to afford music lessons to receive free musical instruction, truly making the program accessible for everyone. We are fulfilling an unmet community need for the arts and will make a significant difference in the lives of disadvantaged participants. In that, you might even go forward with that and explaining how it's going to make that difference. A very good agency will not be able to offer this project without funding from Impact100 Westchester. This is for a drop-in center for domestic violence survivors. That the creation of this new drop-in center is innovative solution, and that'll provide a safe, confidential place to obtain legal counseling and referrals to psychosocial support. The center will be life-changing for users and the first of its kind in the region. So that shows that its uniqueness, only made possible by Impact100 funders. Another one, the proposed program expansion will create a unique multi-generational program providing meaningful arts enrichment to 75 children and transforming the lives of 75 seniors by offering them opportunities for socialization and sense of purpose. So that's the outcome for them. So again, still keeping in the target audience question, now is this, try to tell them whether this project is, transformation for the target audience is short term. Is it long term? Here's where you can talk about whether it'll have a ripple effect, meaning replicable, or a ripple effect in general. So by adding a job placement component to the job skills training program, we will ensure young women with autism secure employment opportunities that match their skills and interests and the needs of the business. As our young women attain employment and achieve greater independence, confidence, and self-advocacy, the overall being of the entire family improves. Same can be said for something like childcare. By giving the children childcare and early education, you're also helping the family stability increase by helping the parents or guardians keep their employment. So here the goal is to break, on this one, the goal is to break the cycle of poverty. So here's some anticipated outcomes you can talk about in terms of, how many people will develop the skills necessary to fulfill jobs in the tech industry, where current and future employment opportunities are very high for computer skills required positions. 80% of the program participants will report improve their job situation because of job training. They'll have a secure job, they'll have a better job, they'll obtain promotion, they'll be able to receive a raise. 80% of participants will report increased economic security, self-sufficiency, and then the demand for qualified employees in Westchester computer tech industries will be reduced. So it's like a double whammy. And that something I came across in the culinary arts training program that won the grant, because not only did it give the people the skills for the culinary skills and be able to help them get those jobs, it also fulfilled the jobs that the Westchester County they were looking for to fill those positions. So it was a double whammy, which was great. And it also fulfilled, being that it also the part of the training was to have the participants make practice making lunches in the kitchen, and the organization makes lunches for their participants in general, all their program participants. So that was also another thing, an added benefit of this program that wasn't directly related, but it was very important because it was transformative for the organization too. So here's another one. I just put another one. This is about the music lessons. More economically disadvantaged children will increase their ability to play an instrument and experience the joy of music and playing in ensembles with others. So here's all the stats of what the outcomes are going to be. They're going to learn to play an instrument. They're going to play, maybe they'll be able to report that they intend to play more in the future, or to really explore further their musical interests. That there's a 10% increase in the rate at which children learn to play an instrument, that they improve their public performing speaking skills, that they report they're more, or their parents report that they're more self-confident with their peers and have positive self-esteem, all the things that music lessons can do. They might achieve higher math scores. I mean, this is really talking all the outcomes of how it can be transformative, and putting in some real stats that you hopefully would be able to measure in some way, whether it be, a self-survey, a parent survey, or educational survey, or grades if it's an educational program. So that's what I'm going to conclude with on that. The outcome should be measurable. You have to be able to show that you have to be able to show you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and that the outcomes that you're saying you're going to achieve, that you know that you can, and that you'll be able to measure that you did it. And here, just another thing, a client or anecdote can be impactful for reviewers, like on childcare. You might, for an underserved population, might want to have a client story, or or a quote about how important and impactful childcare is. Okay, now we're moving off target audience. Yeah.
So
Okay,
there
Deborah.
is a question in the chat that if your partner is a network or task force, is it
Is it
better
what?
if your partner is a network or a task force, in other words, a group? Is it better to have one letter from the overall umbrella organization or individual letters from each member?
Well, there's going to be one applicant. One organization has to be the lead in completing the application. That's to start. And then under collaborators, that's where I would talk about who the rest of the group is and list all those people in the group. And then I probably would recommend getting MOUs for each of those separately, so that you can show that these are all part of a group and they are all committed to this project. But you have to have one organization being the lead to submit and, fill out the application. I hope that answers that.
That was actually my question, but it's not the task force or the association that's applying, they're a partner. So like Lifeway Network's applying, but we're applying with a task force.
Right. Well, I guess the partners you would be putting under the collaborators, right?
Right. So
And
it's,
then I would get
yeah.
I would definitely get as many as you can. I mean, I don't know how many partners there are, but as many as you can. I get either an MOU or a letter of support, depending on
Okay.
what kind of project it is. If it's really dependent on, um, here's an example. Uh, there was an agency that was going to do a new child care program in a new center, and the center had the building, and they were going to give them the building. So they had to get a memo, an MOU, to say that they agree in all the responsibilities of the partners. MOU is stronger, in terms of legality. It really gets into the details of what the responsibilities are each of each partner, and the timing, and any commitments like that, any financial commitments, versus a letter of support where, like, I have a youth client organization client that is works with children, a 9-year program beginning in grade 4, and we work with different community partners, but they help us get new clients, new participants. They're not, we get letter of supports from them. Like, yes, we support this program because we help them get participants. Like, we're a referral source more than anything. So that's the difference where it might be, a letter of support versus an MOU.
I just want to ask, if you can't get an MOU worked out and you don't want to do a letter of support because it's too lightweight, could you do something in between, like a letter of commitment or something like that, where they say, this is what we do for this project?
I think you can, but I would probably I would talk to Grant, I would talk to Impact 100 about that. I would send them an email about it because I know from own experience in the past that they really want to know that your collaborators are solid, especially if it's that it needs the legality of the MOU, that it needs to have that MOU. And if I know one of the applicants was not ready to give the MOU, they don't have it yet. So they did do a letter of commitment, but they said in it when they would expect to have a formal MOU, what date. Because letter of commitment to them, this is what I think, I would confirm with Impact. I don't think they think it's as strong as an MOU where an MOU may be required. And in the sense of that childcare, I know that they did not have the MOU yet, but they said they got letter of commitment, got as much as they could in terms of detail. But then they said in the application or on the letter, when they would have a formal MOU.
Great.
But I would run all that by Impact 100 too, in case, they have a different thought about it. But I know they do want to know that your collaborators are solid if you have something that really requires them, not just a referral source.
I want to just also let everybody know that there have been some really great additions of data sources that are particular to Westchester and New York State. Really interesting. They're in the chat. And we'll
Great.
I'll see if we can add that to the materials.
Yeah, I can add it to the slides before we send it.
Great.
Yeah, before we send them out, I'll add it to the slides. That'd be terrific. Okay, so I'll go back. All right. So the next question, they want to know, where's your project going to take place? Not where the organization is, but where is this project going to take place? If it's a new childcare center, put the new address of where the new childcare center is. So just one sentence. You have 6,000 characters, but there's plenty of ways you can answer this. But they want to know your address. Where is this going to happen? You can mention the characteristics of the facility if it's relevant. You can say if a new space is being created, what plans for renovation, and how the capacity to serve your project's target audience. I would describe the venue, say, oh, it's 3 floors, it's 300, 3,500 square feet. What the uniqueness is, have 6 separate classrooms, really describe what that facility is, if it's a facility. And if it's partly virtual, you can say that too. Part of this program is going to be virtual. The next question is what percent of the people to be served are Westchester residents? If your project serves more than Westchester residents, you can put down whatever the percentage is. I know that Impact 100 doesn't have a rule in terms of what percentage it has to be above that's serving Westchester residents, but I would know that this is compelling and it's competitive, that the more percent you have of Westchester residents in this project, especially also in terms of number of people, the more compelling and competitive it'll be. If you're going to put in that only 20% are Westchester residents and it's not a lot of people, it's not really going to be very impactful to them. One thing I will address when we get to the project budget worksheet, but I'm going to mention it here for the first time. There's going to be 2 columns on the project budget worksheet. There's going to be a total project column, and there's going to be an Impact 100 project column. In the total project column, where you put your total project for the budget, whether or not it's paid for by Impact 100, don't, if it's serving Westchester and Putnam, don't put just Westchester as the project budget. They want to see the whole thing. So if it costs $3 million or $500,000 for your project to serve, and the project is serving Westchester and Rockland, your project budget should, the total project budget should add up to 500,000. Don't put 300,000 if that's just the Westchester. In the Impact 100 column, that's the budget that you're going to put in that adds up to that grant. So if it's 80,000, that column's going to add up to 80. If it's 100,000 that they're giving us, that's going to add up to 100. But I'll show that in more detail as we get to the project budget. So now they want to know, this is about how the project fits within the organization mission, how it's transformational for the organization. Before we talked about transformation for the target audience, now we're going to talk about it for the organization. Why are you doing this project and why now? You have a good amount of room to fulfill that answer. So, we're trying to tell you to, talk about how it furthers your mission, talk about how it fits your strategic plan. Does it increase your capacity, like double the number of people you can serve organizationally? Does it add a new service or location? And I've given you some examples here. The grant will enable us to expand our cancer-related support services into Northern Westchester, currently in Southern Westchester. We will address the increased incidence of cancer due to delays in cancer screening because of COVID-19 in areas of Northern Westchester that are hotspots for cancer and inequitable access to healthcare. This will provide enhanced recognition and awareness. We will be recognized as the go-to source for in-home cancer support services through Westchester County, not just Southern Westchester. So it's talking about how it's transformative for the organization. And it'll enable us to expand the depth of services that we are not able to do before. Here's another one. Adding a job placement component to our job skills training program for women with autism enables the organization to more effectively fulfill its mission of helping young women with autism live independent, productive lives. Here's one about the childcare. We will expand our childcare offerings by building a new childcare center so more families in Port Chester will have access to critical childcare and early education for their children. By doing so, we will accommodate an increasing wait list. This is where they're talking about how it's transformational for the organization. It will accommodate an increasing wait list for childcare slots and address the desperate need for childcare and lack of affordable options in Port Chester. With more access to childcare, we will also transform the economic mobility of the family. That's talking about more about the target. The next question is they want to know who the key staff are responsible for implementing this project. So you don't have a lot of room, so you're going to really have to just bullet and brief, or who the people are briefly. You want to show how their background and expertise is really critical to the role in which that they're doing. So you identify the roles and you identify why they're critical, why their background and expertise is critical. So here, Jane Capable will be the project manager. She has been a site manager for the past 3 years and supervises our direct support staff. She has an MSW from Smith College and worked previously as a domestic violence counselor and led peer youth counseling training for XYZ organizations. So you're showing for that program why that she's important. And then the next question, when does it start? So we are recommending don't have the Impact 100 portion of your spending start until after August 15th. Again, they're saying if the project for which you're requesting Impact 100 funds is part of a larger project, please indicate. They only want to know when the Impact 100 portion of the project starts. So don't put something that starts before August 15th because they don't care that you started, this renovation in June. They want to know when their part is going to start. Now they're going to talk about, we talked about timeline before about the logistics, like how this program project is going to work, how the renovation is going to be built. Now we're talking about when do you need the money? They want to know what the anticipated timing is for your money. And they give you some examples like 50% August 2026, 50% November, and the project expected to be completed by November 30th. And they want to tell you that, note that transformational project grants will not be distributed before August 2026. So a couple of notes that I have here that, again, reminding you that the grants have to be expended within 18 months of the initial grant installment, and you should show that you have thought through these details and why you need the X amount of the money by X amount by the time. So here's for a renovation. We require the 50% of the grant award by August 15th. And that's because we have to select contractors and equipment in August. We have to order the sports equipment and all the materials in August. And that in late August and early September, we have to do the installation of all these things. And then the balance by October 2026, because then we're going to purchase and install an AC unit. And then, again, evaluate in December and ongoing through the year. But so it shows when you need some of the money for that renovation. Here's for more of a programmatic project where 50% they want in August so they can purchase a van and the supplies, get all the family partner providers secured, hire the teacher, because if you're having a program start in September, you got to hire the teacher before then and the bus driver. And then you're going to have your schedule and start preparing lesson plans. So 50% are going to need to, from after that, are going to need starting after August to pay your staff costs from September through June, where you're implementing the program and how that, where that's going to need to get paid. I'm just noting here, this is kind of one of the other last questions. So if you have room, you can talk about again, remind them how impactful and exciting and innovative this program is, all those buzzwords, how it would not be able to be done otherwise without their funding, that these poor children were not going to be able to get music lessons and musical instruction, which is truly making the project accessible to everyone, providing equity in the community, say something innovative and heartfelt. More kind of logistical questions. For instance, do you have any critical permits, approvals, or deliverables by third parties required for the project to succeed? If you say yes to this, they're going to ask you to explain. In that situation before with the group, you could also put here that, we intend to have our MOU or approval by this partner by such and such date, and explain what the partnership is and, why it's important and why those dates are what has to happen. Obviously, if you're doing a renovation, you're going to be talking about some regulatory approvals, any architect drawings, schematics, estimates, permits, and if lease agreements, any of those things, and what kinds of critical things they are and when you're expected to have them. And then there'll be another question next after that. What are your contingency plans for cost overruns and any other potential hurdles which might impact the project feasibility and implementation? So in terms of a renovation, like you can put like 10% or whatever, some cost percentage contingency, you could put that in the other line or embed it in your construction renovation line when I show you the project budget, but show the amount. They want to know what your plans are for any costs that you may incur later that you might have a contingency have to be about. That again, they want to know that there's a management plan for B and a C plan. If it doesn't work, what if it doesn't happen? Are you going to have to hire out versus having an inside person do the program? So that means there'll be an extra cost for that. Next question, is this a renovation, construction, or facility? So if you say yes, they're going to want you to upload a contractor estimate. So if you are planning to do a renovation, you do have to have an estimate from a contractor. And that estimate really needs to spell out a detailed description of each step of the work, the timing of each step of the work, and the cost for each step of the work. It can be, and you can say, when you're talking about collaborators that you are looking at these two contractors and submit both of them or one of them, but you're not gonna move forward with this project if you don't have some kind of estimate or quote for the work. So now, in terms of that, again, another question for those who have construction or renovation projects, they want to know if you own the facility that's being renovated or constructed. So if you say no, like for instance, if you're renting, or you have renting, but you're able to do some renovations to it, they're going to want a copy of your lease agreement. And so I know I've been asked before, and this has happened with a client I've had too where, there's no real exact requirement in terms of number of the years of a lease, but based on experience, I will tell you if your lease agreement is less than 2 years, there's going to be some concern. And the membership will ask what the plans are beyond your 2 years. Does it have it written in there that you're eligible for an extension? Or you can purchase the property after 2 years. That could be in the lease agreement. Some nonprofits and projects have been so strong that their membership has been comfortable with shorter term leases, like 2 to 5 years. Hearing about what you plan to do beyond their grant funds, it really affects how a member votes. This process is competitive to move from one round to the next. I know for the culinary arts training program, they wanted a 10-year lease. It was a rental, but they wanted a 10-year lease. So they may all offer excellent services, but you have to, understand that whether a nonprofit owns the location versus rents or has a long-term lease or a short-term lease with a clause in it that says you can be renewable, it's going to affect how they vote. So the next question, you have some opportunities to submit some additional information that have to do with your project. It's not necessarily a construction project. You can put your schematics, your architectural drawings, your photos of the site so they can see the before and an after. So the photos of the current site to show how disheveled it is, how it needs the renovation desperately. You can put in surveys that substantiate the need for a program. Like if you have an internal survey that shows how successful a program's been, and now you're expanding it, like the one that was in Southern Westchester, and now you're expanding to Northern, you can put in some surveys of your constituents from Southern to show that the program itself is successful. If it's a new program that's educational, that music lesson, you can put in the music lessons. What's the curriculum for a new program that you're starting? You can here's where you're going to put in your letters of support, your MOUs, any brochures, newsletters. I mean, really can run the gamut of what you can put in, but it's a great opportunity to put in additional documents. I think wherever you think there may be a question, and if there's a document and you can't explain it all in the application, but you have a document that does, that's where I think you can put that in. So before we go on to project budget, Deborah, is there any questions on the actual application itself, the narrative part?
Joanne, you're so clear that there is a remarkable lack of questions.
Either that or people have fallen asleep because they're so bored.
I don't think that's it. No questions
Okay.
for now.
I'm sure, things may come up later. I'm also available after this call, but I'll just keep going. All right. So your project budget, you're going to get an Excel project budget worksheet. They don't have it available yet because they have a sample project budget worksheet on the website, but they don't want you using that yet because when they announce the project budget, that's when they're going to have the real one available online. But I will show you a sample, which is going to look exactly the same and show you how to fill it out. The first important thing is that they want you to use your organization as the file name. And this is the one case where you do not convert it to a PDF. Leave it as an Excel file. Don't convert it to a PDF, but use your organization as the file name. And all the instructions about this are on their website. And another thing they wanted me to reiterate here is you're going to see that there's at certain times, if your Impact 100 column does not add up to the total Impact 100 grant, you're going to get an error message. They will not accept any project budgets that have an error message. If you have any problems, you don't understand why there's an error message, you can't figure it out, contact them and they will help you figure out why you're still getting an error message, because they are very clear now that they're not accepting it if it's got that error message. Okay, so I've been through some of these details, these tips before, but just to remind you again, the Impact 100 funding column has to match the total of it, has to match the total of the transformational grant. If it's $80,000, that total of the Impact 100 funding column has to match that. Um, and if in the total project expenses column, here, let me show you the example. I'm just going to move to the actual thing and then I'll go back. Oops, hang on, it's going too fast. Okay, so just I'll go back in a second, but here's just, an example of what it looks like. So the name of your organization goes at the top, the name of your project, that 80,000, whatever that number is going to be what the number is, and that's what you're going to get. So that's why they don't want you filling it out until after the 12th, because it'll say what it is, what the grant amount is. So then you're going to fill out your project budget by expense category. So on the left under categories, there's different subcategories. There's facilities construction, there's supplies, there's transportation, technology, incremental staff and consultants, existing staff, and then core operating expense and other. And then it shows you what they're defining as those subcategories, how they define it. And in the pink area is where you're going to fill in how you would spend the grant money, the Impact 100 grant money. You may not fill out every line. You may not have anything to do with facilities, but you may not have transportation. But yes, we're going to use incremental staff, and yes, we do have supplies. And that's where on that last column, Impact 100 funding, is where you're going to fill in those numbers, and you're going to explain how you got to them. Those two columns is what I was talking about before. The first column on the second to last column, sorry, is total project dollars. So if your project is $150,000, you're going to show how it's that $150,000 is allocated between all those lines. And then if the Impact 100, let's stick with the 80, is $80,000, you're going to show of that 150,000, how you're spending the $80,000 that they're going to give you. So if you have, I don't know, $30,000 in the total project column for supplies, you can't put $40,000 for the Impact 100 on the Impact 100 supplies line, because you can't have an Impact 100 line of 40,000 that's higher than the total project of 30 for that one line for supplies. And so that's where, and so you go down all the way to the totals for both. If you have 100, if you have 80,000 here, it'll be fine. But if you have 100,000 in the total Impact 100 column, that's when you're going to get that error message. And the error message will be in red. If you have everything else, if you don't have the red, then you're good to go. So I'm going to go back because I want to take you through each of the sections. Okay, so I did that. Oh, I said this. Okay. So that first line for facilities, construction, renovation, this is where you estimate, you put in your details. If your project is renovation, obviously. You enter your details, you put in the estimate for demolition, carpentry, plumbing, electrical, you can put in your permit, when the permits, architectural fees should go in here, not in consultants. That's one place where you need to put it in. If you have architectural fees, it should go in this line. And here's where you can put your cost contingencies for renovation, but spell it out. Say in that pink area, and you probably will have limited space in that pink shaded area where you get the description. So you're going to have to do some bulleting or some, really good editing on how to include some of the information that you need to include about what this construction is going to look like. Supplies, materials, supply, this is what they're saying supplies are. Expenditures for materials, supplies, or services provided by an outside vendor like food, paper, printing, to be financed by their grant, not the project, but by their grant. They say don't include labor or consulting costs here. Input these in either incremental of existing staff or consultants below as appropriate. But you should spell out quantities and cost per item as you can. So for instance, here, if you have 100 stethoscopes and they're each at $150, spell it out. They equal 100, 1,500. If you're purchasing 10 iPads, you say 10 iPads at $800 each equal $800. At $100 each equal $8,000. Spell it out as much as you know about cost per item and on terms of supplies and or services. If you're saying for services. Transportation, if you're purchasing a van or leasing a van, say what the purchase price is, say what the lease is, how much it is, based on how many years the lease is. If you're putting in, driving or Ubers or busing, put in cost per bus, how many buses, so that you can get a total for the busing, cost per mile, if they're talking about miles that are going to be needed to be funded, in total. So cost per mile times miles needed equal total cost. Technology, if you have computers, software, network, hardware and writing, secure wiring, security, desktop equipment, again, spell it out as much as you can. We're buying 10 computers times, $1,000 each equal $10,000. This software this software which costs this much. The networking hiring will be done by whoever, and this is how much it costs of the wiring equipment. Okay, yeah, Deborah.
I just have a question about the mileage cost. Would you use the IRS rate, or what rate do you think they would accept?
Oh, it's a good question. I think I would probably use the IRS rate. Um, I'm not 100% sure, but that would be my guess. I don't know if anybody else has any feeling on that. I don't deal a lot with that, to be honest. So,
I've used that in the past. I just don't know if there's.
yeah, it's a good question. If you're not sure, you could also run it by Impact 100 and say, would you like me to use the IRS rate, or do you have another rate that you view more appropriate? Doesn't hurt. I don't think they're gonna, I think if you use the IRS rate, I don't think they're gonna be so stickler about it. I don't.
I think you're right, especially maybe
I think they're gonna just be happy that you have a rate, that it's based on some solid information. Whether or not that's the right one, but it's solid, it's legit.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next line is incremental staff and consultants. So this they define as being compensation, including any benefits or fringe expenses for new hires, whether they're part-time or full-time or permanent or temporary, and or consultants who only for those who, for work directly on this project and to be funded by the Impact 100 grant. So for a new hire, if you're hiring a full-time social worker, to provide 100 teens with one-to-one counseling sessions at a new teen center, you might want to put that in there, and that full-time cost is X, but you can explain why it's needed and what they're going to do. For a consultant, an IT consultant who's going to support, they're going to install the new server and other tech. So we're going to hire that person at, $100 an hour for 10 hours to equal X. So if it's fee-based, say we're going to hire a consultant and they charge X fee to perform the following, meaning they're going to do X amount of hours of work, or they're going to get this particular thing accomplished, and their fee is. For existing staff, again, they want you to include any benefits or fringe expenses who will work directly on the project. And I wanted to say one thing too on whether on the fringe and the benefits. If you have the room, it's not a bad idea to show to split it out, meaning here's the salary, here's the fringe, the benefits / fringe, here's the total. If you have the room, if you have a lot of explanation about, why you need it or you have so many staff to have to talk about, then don't do that. But if you can separate it, I don't think it's a bad thing to do. An example for existing staff is that domestic violence agency who is going to do a new mobile technology program. So under existing staff, they included the communications associate and director of operations who would spend some dedicated time. The communications associate was going to spend 15% of their time and 5% for the director of operations on the project, because they are going to be involved with the setup, with the training, with the liaison, with the consultants, with the troubleshooting and analytics. So these expenses, if you want Impact 100 to pay for them, would be the ones that would be on that Impact 100 grants funds column. But however, under core operating expenses, which you do not have to explain, and I'll show you that in a minute, you do not have to write anything in that pink area. Matter of fact, they blocked it out because they don't want you to have to explain. That's
It
where,
feels like a crazy Wednesday from last week.
oh, somebody got a mute. Thank you. All the management staff that that you're not asking Impact 100 to fund. So the executive director, the CFO, chief development officer, that would be in the Impact 100, under the Impact 100 column under organizational core operating expense. So some more examples of existing staff, the construction project, they're saying shows how the ED, the COO, and the FD financial director was part of the overall project expenses, and reflected under existing staff, but they're not part of the Impact 100 request. So yes, there is existing staff for that project needed, but they're not asking Impact 100 to pay for it. So those expenses would show in the total project expense column, but not the Impact 100 column. Another example for additional responsibilities, for example, existing staff member may be working with local construction companies to secure externships or hire vocational training program graduates. So for example, and I mentioned before, the current chef and their vocational training program is going to be doing, helping teach the program by doing additional hours. Okay. Core operating expenses. You're allowed up to 30% of the Impact 100 grant to be allocated to that Impact 100 line for core operating expense. Impact 100 really wants you to use this. They've been telling me that so many nonprofits are so hesitant to do this. They feel like, oh, I don't know if I should do that. They want you to do it. They're telling me that the first thing you should do when filling out your project budget is to max out your core operating expenses to 30% of the total award. They don't want you to be hesitant to do it. You don't need an explanation. So do it as much as you can. But if you really need them to fund that renovation, that 80,000, you don't have to, but they're encouraging you to use it for core operating expenses if you need it. What they're saying this is their definition of core operating expenses. It's expenses allocated to this project to be financed by the Impact 100 grant, either facility costs, rent, insurance, utilities, general supervisory staff salaries like that COO or the ED. These costs are not project specific and will be incurred by your organization whether or not the project moves forward. Again, you just can't have it exceed 30%. They could come back to and ask you why 30%, but they want you to use it, so I would use it. And then there's an other line that's the last subcategory. There's another line that, any items you can put in like marketing, advertising, newsletters, flyers to announce like the grand opening of a new adaptive gym. They're saying that if you plan to use a portion of the Impact 100 grant to award stipends or scholarships, which will be paid to your organization as program fees, they're requesting that you do not list the stipend scholarships. Instead, just describe how you would spend the money. And then again, I'm going to remind you that after you completed the spreadsheet, save it as an Excel with your organization name in the file. And then once that's saved, you'll upload it to SlideRoom. Don't convert it to a PDF. So a couple of things about the project budget again before I see if there's any questions. The next thing you filled out your spreadsheet. Now they want to know, okay, how much does your project cost? And this is the project in its entirety, not just the Impact 100 grant, which is, they know how much that costs. So if your kitchen costs $150,000 to renovate, you're going to spell out that $100,000 is for the kitchen renovation and $50,000 or the projects for your culinary arts training program is $150,000. $150,000 is going to go toward the kitchen renovation. $50,000 is going to go toward the program costs with the supplies and the staffing. So I think I've said this a few times, but your project budget can be more than the 80,000 or the 100,000 of the Impact 100 grant is. You just have to show the difference and how the funding, you'll have to show where they're getting the funding from to make up the difference. I know that's come up in the past, like if you have a super large capital project or program project, like a $5 million project, you might want to break it down into a smaller entity, so that it's not coming in at 5 million. Maybe it's a sub project of the big project. The next thing is if the cost of the project greater than the Impact 100 grant. So in that situation up above, yes, it is. So you're going to say yes. And then you're going to get the next question is, okay, well, how are you going to fund the rest of it? So of that, let's say the Impact 100 grants 100,000. So I'm going to have to show where I'm getting that other 50,000 from. It could be things you're applying to. It could be, they'll want to know what the source is, how much is expected, and whether it's committed, yes or no. And you'll have opportunities to add rows here. So you just have to have all those sources you're listing has to equal that difference. So if your project is 300,000 or 400,000 and the budget, Impact 100 budget's 100, you have to, show the difference of 200 or 300,000. And all the sources of funding you're putting in there need to add up to of the total project budget. They don't have to be committed yet, but they want to know that you have a plan, that you have a plan for funding. It could be individual donors, it could be a funding campaign, it could be an event, a gala, it could be whatever, or it could be specific grants and specific things like that. But you have to show that you thought up that revenue that you're going to need to get this project funded, and whether it's committed and where it's coming from. So once you answer that, because again, if your project budget is higher than the Impact 100 budget, they want to know what the constraints or uncertainties about some of the funding that you're putting in there, about the timing of it. So, okay, which is, especially for the ones where you're saying it's not committed yet. Okay, well, here's what you're going to say. We expect to receive notification here. And if we don't get that, we're going to look at this, we're going to do some more grant prospect research and identify 3 other funders. Another situation came up where it was a vocational training program when they had a government grant in the application in there, but the amount that they were going to be awarded was dependent on the number of students they were going to enroll. And so they don't know that until after they got the students enrolled. Which is training dollars. So you would have to explain that we expect to have, based on projected enrollment of 100 students, we expect to get this amount from New York State, but it's dependent on the number enroll. So here's where you just put any constraints in, uncertainties that respect to the time, and show if you have constraints or uncertainties, show that you have a plan in case in case those uncertainties take place. I think they'd want to know, again, you have a plan B. That's it on the project budget page. Before I go forward, because now we're talking about just uploading some financial documents and then some other financial questions, which are going to be new to this application this year. Deborah, are there any questions specifically on the project budget sheet?
I see there's a question. Is there a preferred percentage of match?
Of a match?
Yeah.
I don't know of a preferred percentage. That's a question you could ask Impact 100. I have not been told of a preferred match. There's not a requirement for a match, I will tell you that. There is not a requirement for a match on this. If you get the grant, you get the grant. You don't have to match it. So I'm not sure what the match is referring to. I just want to make that clear. There is no match on this. If another grant that, as far as your other funding, if your project is bigger, and you have another grant that has a requirement of a match, that you got to articulate what that match is, but that's based on that particular funder. I hope that makes sense. There is no match here for Impact 100's grant. Okay, so you've completed your sheet. Now they want you to upload some information about your audit statements and your 990s. So first they're going to ask you when your fiscal year ends. Is it the calendar year or is it something else like June 30th, which many organizations have? June 30th is their year-end fiscal. So you'll tell them what it is, and that you just put it in the format of month, year, month, date, year. Next question is they want to know if your fiscal audited statement for 2025 is available. For many, it's going to be no, way too early. So you'll say yes, which is if you say yes, you'll say good for you. You'll upload your 2025 and 24. I don't have any client that has their 25 audited statement available. Anyway, so I would be saying no. So then they're going to be saying, when is it going to be available? And you'll put in your best guess. I mean, based on history. I have organizations that have a calendar year fiscal, and I know they don't get their, I just got their 24 in September. So I'll be saying, all right, well, I'm not going to have it available to September of 26. You just based on history, put it when you think it'll be available based on when it's been done before. Okay, so then based on the fact that you said I don't have my audited statement available for 25, that you've told them when you expect to have it or you think you'll have it. So now they want you to put in something preliminary. So they're saying, please share with us your fiscal 2025 preliminary management prepared financial documents. They're saying these could be drafts when you prepare what you prepare for your board. They could be standard QuickBook reports, but they want you to make sure you include not only your revenue and expenses, but also your assets and available liabilities. So, some clients will not have a preliminary audit for 2005 if you have a year end June 30th. But again, you can upload your quick end of year balance sheet as of June 30th, 2025. They've given you some, definite, I think they've explained some options of how you can address this. I would have your finance people do this, whether it's the finance director or your board chair, the finance board chair, however your organization is determined, and have them put that together. And if you have any questions about it, I would definitely touch base with Impact 100. Once you do that, whatever your preliminary final financial statement is, then, and this question, this is again, when you're saying I don't have the 25 available, the audit available, then you'll be able to upload your 24 and you'll be able to upload your 23. And they make sure it's always including the audit review opinion. Most audits come as a PDF that has that letter at the front. They want to make sure that's part of it. Now you see pretty same issue with your 990. Is that 25 one available? So if it is, you can upload the 25 available. They want all the supporting schedules, not just the abbreviated version. So make sure it has that. There can absolutely be an issue with size limit of that PDF. I've had that happen before because SlideRoom only has a 10 megabyte size limit for PDFs. So you'll need to compress your file before uploading if you find that your file is too large. Same on the audited statement if for some reason that's too large. And there's a whole, under the FAQs on Impact 100, there's a whole instructions on how to do that if you don't understand how to compress a file. And just for those of you who don't know, the 990 is your most recent tax return. So if you're saying no, I don't have 2025 available, which many don't, here's when you will upload. They're not asking for anything preliminary. Here's where you'll upload your fiscal 2024 with all the same schedules, all the schedules. They want to know next, what's the name of the organization on your 990? Does it match the name? So you put that in. Does it exactly match the name of the grant applicant? It should, but if it doesn't, you're going to have a pop-up to explain why it doesn't, and whether it's a sponsor or whoever. But if it doesn't match for some reason, you need to explain why it's different on the 990 versus your 501c3 or the name that's on the application. The next question is they want to know the total revenue for the current year according to the most recent uploaded Form 990 that you put in. So if you put in 2024 or 25, they're even telling you where to get it. You look on part 1 of the 990, look for line 12, that's where it is, and that's what you put in. If for some reason you have revenue that's less than 250,000, which you shouldn't if you're doing this application, but if you do, you're going to get a pop-up that says if your revenue number is less than our minimum of $250,000, please contact us at Grants Impact 100 Westchester before completing this, because this transformational grant is for those organizations to have revenue of $250,000 or more. So hopefully that's not going to be the case. And then there is an opportunity where you can click, we have contacted Impact 100 Westchester and have gotten clearance to complete this application. If for some reason, only if you've gotten approval for them to continue would that happen. But I would think that would be extremely rare. Now they're going to want to know about your operating budget. Okay, it's now January. Is your operating budget in this for fiscal 2026 available? So if you say yes, because you're on a calendar year and you say yes, okay, great. Upload your operating budget for fiscal 2026, even if it's for a June 30th end fiscal. If you have it available, great. If you don't, they're going to want to know that you're going to be able to submit to them your complete final approved fiscal year 2026 budget by no later than February 20th. So hopefully you'll be able to click that and say, "Yep, I got it. I'll have it by February 20th, 2026." Then the next question they want your operating budget versus actuals full year for fiscal 25. So you'll have, I would, have one column operating budget 2025, second column actuals 2025. Note that what the fiscal is, if it's calendar or, June 30th or whatever, define that in your Excel spreadsheet. You take that Excel, show it budget first. I would show revenue and expenses. I tend to do that with an operational budget, not just expenses. And then it'll be in your Excel. Make sure you download it as a PDF before you upload it to the system here to SlideRoom. So upload that PDF once you have that done. This question that they want to know, again, this is about financial viability. They want to know about your short-term liquidity. How many months of revenue, cash, liquid funds do you have? How liquid are you? You have 6,000 characters, and they've made a point to make sure I make a point to you that they really want to know the number of months. That they've given you an example here. Say that you can put information on your cash in hand and available under credit facilities. They give you even an exact sentence that you can replicate, which I would encourage you to give to your finance people and replicate it. We have X amount in cash, X amount available under our credit line, and a remaining X amount available under our learned term loan. Again, if this is relevant to your organization, these resources are expected to cover operating expenses for X months. Don't fill out the first sentence without filling out the second. It's great to put in how much money you have and what you have, but they want to know how many months that's going to last you. So make sure you do both of those things. Now, these are the next couple of questions are new to this application because of what's going on in, the community with grants and with funding by the government. They are very aware of the ongoing uncertainty in this current climate. And many times nonprofits receive government funding, but they do not, Impact 100 doesn't really know the specific nature of their funding because the documentation they've asked for in the past has been mostly looking backwards. But now we're talking about, they want to understand looking forwards what the nonprofit's financial position is, determine whether the organization is going to continue to have a concern, specifically with this government situation. So they're asking you to fill out these specific questions, especially important for those who have traditionally received significant government funding. And I'm talking about the organization here, the organization's government funding. What contingency plans do you have in place to address potential revenue falls? Again, this is about the organization. So here, does your organization receive any federal, state, or local government funding? Yes or no? If you say yes, this is about your organization. They want to know what percent, what percent of the funding comes from government, and they want to know the sources. So I would just, bullet it out. This one, this much, this one, that much, this one, that much, and then show how it adds up to the total and what percent that is. Now the second question is what amount of that. And based on that 10.1 question, in terms of the revenue comes from government funding, you could use 2025 actuals because you could put in this plan for this year, 2026, probably better, and show what's committed, what's not. You'll probably have showed that a little bit on the project side up before, but this is about the organization. And then they're going to want to know what amount of that is at risk. So they want you to be specific. So I would list and explain here what is applied for versus approved but not yet received with amounts. Explain if some are based on reimbursement. if an organization has received approval for a grant but has not yet received the funds, Impact 100 does consider that at risk. You can say when you expect to receive them, even though it's been approved. And and they also say that at-risk grants are not yet approved, even if the organization has historically received that funding. So you have to just tell them, what's going on, what's the situation with the government funding and what's potentially at risk and what could possibly happen. And then the next part of that's going to be, they want to know if you need any contingency plans. Have you adjusted your daily operations since assessing this risk? And do you have contingency place and plan for the next 24 months? Again, they're going to want to know that you can, you have they want an overall financial snapshot of the organization, especially when it comes to government grants, which can be a significant part of many organizations' budget, and that you have a plan for recovering funds if they are at risk and what those plans are, especially in the next 24 months when you're going to be potentially using their money for that project. And so then finally, it's how will any funding uncertainty impact the project you are proposing? If that project involves some government, if you identified some government sources in the previous other questions when we were talking about funding sources for the project, they're going to want to know what how the funding uncertainty is going to impact. And you can just be as specific as possible about it, what's going on with that particular fund and that particular grant, when you expect to hear, and what will happen if you don't get it. What you're going to do if you don't get it. If you have any more questions about that, I probably was going to refer you to Impact 100. If there's something more detailed about that question that you're not really sure about, I think I would be best to talk to them how they want you to handle it. And then finally, we're just talking, easy questions. Who's your finance person? Because they're probably going to call them. Their name, their title, what their role is on the project, and in terms of the documents that you're supplying, their phone number and their email address. And then finally, at the last part of the application, they want you to authorize it. So they want to know that your board of directors are on board with this. So you're going to say, yes, they are. If you say no, you're going to be having got a pop-up that says, according to our eligibility guideline, Impact 100 requires your board of directors to approve the proposal before it's submitted. So you'll say, understood, we will obtain approval from a board of directors before submitted, understood, but there are extenuating circumstances, we'll contact you by email. They're not asking you to attach anything in terms of board approval. You just have to know that that if they ask you to say, have a board chair sign something, that you can, but they're not asking you to submit anything. They just hopefully everybody's project is going to be approved by their board. And then you put your executive director certification. Just by typing in the ED's name, you're certifying that the ED attests to the accuracy and completeness of the proposal. So that's it. Just some general slide room tips. Again, reminder, each organization has to register with a unique email and set up an account and password. Enter use your organization's name during account setup. Do not use your own name. And only one application can be submitted per individual email address. So you don't have two applications from two different email addresses, and the registered email is where all those automated emails and information about the LOI will be sent. So make sure it's someone who keeps track of those emails, so we'll be alerted to when emails get sent to them. Sometimes I know organizations have an info at, don't do that, because people may not see it, and it's the right person who has to see it. And again, I've told you a few times, Impact 100 is really open to talking to you. So if you have any questions, they want to support you. So you can reach out to them. But the goal here is to make this concise, clear, compelling. So many applications they get sometimes are not clear, are not concise, and certainly you want to make it compelling because this is competitive. But they do want to support you in any way that they can. Use an active voice. It's much more compelling than a passive voice. And so I've given, again, the grants at impact100westchester.org contact, and my contact information, GPLA's contact. I have to fix the impact one. It has to say .org. Sorry, I'll fix that for the slide. So there's lots of people who are willing to help you along the way. And so don't hesitate to, I'm going to stop sharing. Don't hesitate to reach out, and I wish you the best of luck.
Well, there are lots of expressions of thanks, Joanne. Chat. It was really useful. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And again, reach out for any questions that you might have for me specifically that are relating to your project that maybe I can help you with. I'm happy to answer anything, as will all the GPLH folks as well. And again, best of luck. I think we'll say goodbye and stop recording.
Stop recording.
Okay.